Oh, okay. Oh, hello. All right, hi everybody. So welcome to the last session of the afternoon. This is going to be our senior capstone project. So senior capstone is the course where it's the last course in our curriculum. Basically, it's the course where we say, you've gotten all the skills, you've learned the principles of these art forms that we teach you. Now, show us what you got. So these are student created, driven projects, and they come up with everything from concept and through until final execution. So we have 3 projects today. I will let the students talk all about them. And with that, we will have our first group up here, Concrete Dreams.
Hello, we are Mad Clam Studios, and today we're presenting Concrete Dreams, a procedurally generated brutalist walking simulator with PS1 graphics and a ghost task that cannot be completed to offer the player direction. I am Megan Austin. I am this project's lead and head coder. I would also like to mention Tyler Hayes and Isaac Haraga as our sound team.
My name's Devin Rogers. I was responsible for asset creation and texturing.
My name's Logan Selly. I was responsible for textures and creating the video behind us.
My name is Cameron Zuhowski, and I was responsible for level design and environment art.
I'm Matthew Roth, and I did lighting and UI design.
I'm Mackenzie Diak, and I did animation.
I'm Alex Broderick, and I did character design and animation.
Brutalism was the building blocks for the aesthetic of our game. Brutalism was a post-war art and architectural movement that rose to popularity due to the art's use of cost-effective materials and bold, stoic designs. Rainer Bonham, an architectural critic and journalist, had described brutalism as being béton brut, as well as describing it as art brut, meaning raw art and raw concrete. Brutalism's popularity has not diminished since the rise in the 60s, as it's still seen today in monumental structures, government buildings, universities, and housing complexes. Our mood board for our game, which inspired our aesthetic heavily, was comprised of brutalist architecture, liminal surrealism, and Sony PlayStation early 3D rendered graphics. We chose this style of rendering for our game because we believed it best reflected the liminal and surreal feel we wanted by blending elements of nostalgia with the unknown, thanks to our PCG system. By mixing brutalism, cost-effective and bold designs, and PlayStation-era graphics, limited poly count, and texture resolution, we were able to kit bash lots of assets to populate our PCG.
In procedurally generated games, props play a crucial role in shaping the immersive experience and enhancing the sense of living, breathing world. These seemingly insignificant objects serve as the building blocks of the game environment, interjecting diversity and realism into each playthrough. Imagine exploring a vast procedurally generated landscape devoid of any props. It would feel barren and devoid of character. Props interject personality into the game world, providing visual cues about its history, culture, and inhabitants.
The level design for Concrete Dreams is focused on creating a unique and infinitely explorable environment rooted in liminal spaces. While we don't have a traditional task or objective drive in our game, we wanted our environment art and our level design to be the driving force behind player engagement. This was achieved through creating level chunks that can be randomized, spawned, and despawned. As you saw with the red squares on the previous slide, the levels will spawn within a given area connected on all four sides. The next challenge was creating a way to connect all the sides that would allow for an interesting route of traversal that would not allow for players to go out of bounds or get out of the play area and be able to, see all the stuff we were trying to hide. The way we fixed the route of traversal was through a series of interconnected and maze-like tunnels that also added a little extra playtime through the levels, since we're kind of limited by how big they can be with it being PCG. The bigger the levels are, the more levels that spawn in, the harder time we're going to have.
Okay, so for lighting is a very crucial element in game design. As I was lighting our game, my goal was to evoke a spectrum of emotions ranging from eerie atmospheres that that give a sense of confinement to warmer, cozier settings that support feelings of comfort. Additionally, I aim to use lighting to shape the environment and guide players as they navigate through the world we created.
Continuing on with the surrealist and brutalist nature of our game, our creatures are not your enemy. There is not real combat while the player traverses the different landscapes. Instead, they will encounter an expressive cast of characters with varying designs, personalities, and forms. When encountering these creatures, the player will be teleported to a new area of the environment. We were inspired to do this by the game LSD Dream Emulator, where the player similarly explores a surrealist environment without a clear objective, touching objects and beings that warp them to a different setting.
With our game, we looked at two different art styles for our creatures, and first is with kit-bashed version of brutalism. Through researching other games, we found that quite a few characters fit this art form. However, we looked primarily at these three. First being Pyramid Head from Silent Hill, a creepy monster inspired by brutalism by combining the human body, a pyramid, and some elements of terror. Second was with Dark Souls 3's wheel skeleton enemy that embraces brutalism by combining a human skeleton, a wheel, and a set of spikes. Third, we looked at iRock from Super Mario 64, which is made up of an eye, a hand, and some yellow brick. Thus led to the conclusion that some games combine three known elements to create unique characters in the sense of kit-bashed brutalism, which aided us in our creature design, as you see here. Okay. However, these two, Scotsy and Brutus, were inspired by two separate brutalism art pieces, as you see here. The second art style we related to was surrealism with our character and creature designs. And we looked at Silent Hill, Super Mario, and Brutal Orchestra to draw inspiration from. What possibly see in a dream, or see maybe some cute creatures and some that would make the audience feel uneasy to give an unexpected experience in our game. Bell Chicken was our first experiment with Kit Bash brutalism of merging a bell, a robot monkey, a chicken to forge a new and interesting character. Scotty, a little character forged through merging creepy aspects of surrealism to make his brutal statue come alive. In some basic emotion, you can tell he was a higher being that may find entertainment through the grief of others.
This is one of our brutalist creatures, Brutist. For his animations, I went with the idea of a big and hulking figure imposing as little of a threat as possible, since our creatures are not meant to attack. This is why we have this big hulking creature made of concrete playing catch with itself and just floating around looking as non-imposing as possible. He's just a big guy in a strange world.
We decided procedural generation would suit our game's direction and its general theme, with simplistic building blocks compounding into infinitely more complicated systems. At first, we considered two types of PCG. Binary space partition, the division of space into rooms, and wave function collapse, the placement of objects in space based off the objects around it. And our choice, chunk-based procedural generation, where a grid is created and pre-made levels are placed according to rarity. In creating this system, the goal is to keep things as simplistic and modulated as possible to allow for easy reusability, maintenance, and expansion. And for this system, there are three key components. First, the spawn chunk, which spawns a chunk in a given location. Second, the ability to delete a chunk. And lastly, the reporting of a player's location and relating to our grid. From these three components, a more complex system is created, such as the initial spawning grid, where chunks are spawned in a 5x5 radius, which utilizes the spawn function. The ghost task, which utilizes the player location to determine if to move the task. And finally, moving spawn and deletion. As the player moves, a 5x5 diameter is maintained, everything outside is deleted and regenerated when re-entered, which keeps gameplay unique and fresh, which utilizes all three core functions. When compiled, creates our PCG system, with the left showcasing the system clearly in my dev world, and the right showcasing the final product in-game. We have been MadClad Studios. Thank you for listening. We open now to questions.
Hi. I just want to say that the footage you had of the level space or design space in your presentation portion was better than the more horror trailer you had up front, because everything you described was not a horror game. That initial trailer at the front was more of a horror presentation, when the other footage later on was a slower pace, so you could actually take in the work that you've done.
But also really good job. No, I thought it was a really cool presentation. I love that you made an art project, and that's what I challenged you to do, and I really like the way you've expressed that. I think it was really successful in that way. Like I said, it's hard. Like, it's hard. You know, what makes a good game trailer, right? And so I agree with Tim. I think the main, and I told you this yesterday, but like, you know, the trailer really sold this horror aspect with creatures that chase you, and like that one guy really feels like a character out of like a Suda 51 game, right? But yeah, that chunk in the middle just kind of like slowly let you look around and be like, what's going on in this room? Like, the ball pit is like a Yayoi Kusama work. And, you know, the woman who does the art with all the dots and like the infinite rooms, like that felt like an infinity room. And I'm like, oh, let that be the trailer. And you know, again, I said it yesterday, but I'll say it again. What was tough about that's hard. That's scary and hard when you're students, especially, because you think, what makes a good trailer? What's going to be an exciting trailer? Oh, monsters, right? And, you know, you heard, and again, I told you this yesterday, but like, if that pools game had come out a month ago, and if nobody's seen it, it's just a game where you walk around like swimming pools, like like rec center swimming pool looking environments that are weird and surreal and kind of vaguely threatening. If that would have come out like a month ago, you would have been gold, because that would have given you like the permission to just make a trailer where you like look around weird spaces. But yeah, so like
I would almost cut a new trailer out of shots like the one in the middle. Like, just stare at the brutists for a while playing catch. Like that would sell it. And then like have some tall thing that has that brutalism aesthetic, and then I think it would really wrap it up. But like, yeah, other than that, like the project is lovely, and I thought that you pulled off a really hard task with the PCG and just putting that level of content together.
Something I realized only when like watching through like your level design, is there a reason all the levels themselves don't have like much verticality? Because all the rooms obviously they have like a sky. Is it worried that if you had like a tower in one of them, you'd be able to see it from multiple rooms over? And is that why there were basically kind of a not two-dimensional, but
So with the PCG system, the way I made it in order to keep in with scope with the 3 months we were given, there is no z-axis within the system itself. It can tile out in either X or Y, no problem. Z can be added in future updates, and it is made modular, so I can do that. However, it was not added for this adaptation of the game.
Yeah, the workaround for that being we just built vertical structures such as like a 3-story apartment, like a stairway to nowhere, like different stuff like that to add that verticality until we can get the PCG working in that Z capacity.
Hi. Yeah, that was a really cool project. I like the inspiration that kind of went behind it. It's more though, I mean, it was already kind of discussed that like the trailer itself relied a lot on those horror tropes, which I don't really think in a lot of cases fits with the, I know the term liminal gets thrown around a lot, but very clearly like having very explicit horror tropes in there in something that's meant to be very surrealist and liminal, it doesn't always mesh super well, because I always like to think about it as kind of the feeling you get in a dream where nothing bad happens, but you can tell something's off. And there's just some natural horror that arises because of that. But mixing in things like the Jack in the Box kind of like having that stuff like that can sort of cloud the message that you're going for, so to speak. But what you showed afterwards, just the design inspiration that went behind the characters is really cool, and using procedural generation, like that's a game mechanic that you're using to convey a message, which is really cool. I think that fits really well. But yeah, overall, it was a really cool project.
Thank you.
Hey, y'all. So I was invited as a guest to provide some critiques, and I felt like I should introduce myself. So I'm Grace Collins, I use they, them pronouns, and I am the founder of Snowbright Studio, which is a game studio located up in Cleveland. For your project, I wanted to say that it's really impressive, the technical feat that you pulled off here. So I remember playing Resident Evil on the PlayStation 1 when it came out, spinning up a disc and being like, what is going on? And you really were able to capture like a lot of that, right? Like these textures, that environment, it was kind of pitch perfect for a lot of that. So congrats on that. And so much of it was like a thoughtful and deliberative process, which is awesome. I think I had one critique really, and I think it is kind of a fundamental critique really, which is that you have taken this concept of brutalism, right? And brutalism, though, was a design, it was a form designed for a function, right? Like it was, the function was everything that was happening inside of the building and things like that. And with this game, you have taken that function out and kept the design. And it's okay to do that if it was an intentional subversion of that. And there are parts of here that hint that maybe that was the point. With, but it feels like there's something that's missing there. It feels like there's a core concept, a core piece here that would have taken it from, we've got an interesting design that we've implemented, and we've elevated it above that into true art here, where we're subverting that with intent.
And so some of that pieces of intent. Now, that is something that maybe takes longer than you all had time for. And like I said, the technical pieces of this were really fantastic. So, but I'm curious if you continue on with this in the future, like, you know, what is, you've eschewed the kind of like idea of an ending, but what is the ending for the player? Because whether you want the game to have an ending or not, the player ends their experience with it, and what is that experience intended to be?
So for the directed experience portion of the game, we do have a mechanic inside which we mentioned briefly, which is the ghost task, which is in the building blocks of our game when we were still drafting, we were going to make the game entirely within a parking garage. And the whole goal was you had a clicker and you were trying to find your car. And as the project evolved, we continued and decided to keep that as it felt like an homage, and it felt like it still fit, as we do have parking garage aspects. So we do have a goal for the player in mind, but the caveat is that every time the player gets within the area containing the goal moves, and it's just a way to direct the player around the map to continue for them to see other areas. As for the design aspect, I'll defer to our level designer, Cam.
No, yeah, pretty much what Meg said is spot on. That ghost task, just giving the player the illusion that there's some goal that they can find, but just like keeping it just out of reach, you know, like the just, you gotta be quicker than that kind of, you know, old commercial. Is kind of the theme we're going for here.
I just wanted to say, visually, the game looks great. I think what you were going for, you nailed. I saw some of the stuff you did, Devin, and it looked really good. I saw like this thing is like a vending machine or something. I think it looks really good. One thing though, I think it goes back to the presentation in the trailer. There was like text on the screen, like kind of like internal monologue for the guy or gal, but I don't know if we needed that. It's either, I think what you could have done is either visually show how we should be feeling, like maybe there's like because I remember specifically, oh, I'm in this room again, having like maybe like something that signifies that you're in this room, but you see it again when you turn. But I also think you could also voice act it too, because I think the tone was like a little, you didn't know what you were seeing, but if like the tone is like a little more calm, you might not have had that horror confusion with the trailer. But I think, yeah, I think if you get rid of that text, I think you could probably read better if you make up for it in another way. But overall, I think it looks really great.
All right, you're done.
Thank
Yay.
Thank you.
No, that created like good about like the nature of brutalism involved, which is like it's like I tell them, you know, it's all not actually directing a conversation. We just had a conversation about brutalism.
Yeah.
All right. Hello, I'm Grayson Thralls, and I worked as a lead programmer and a level designer.
I'm Madeline Loescher. I was the narrative designer, sound designer, and the rhythm lead.
And I'm Damian Emmerich, and I did character and level design. I was an asset artist, animator, and level builder, and this is our game. That's Sparky and the Nocturnals. It's a 2D platformer with a rhythm section, and it features our little raccoon character named Sparky, and your goal is to make friends along your journey and play and perform in a battle of the bands. I wanted to preface that a few of our gifts are broken, but they work wonderfully in the game as well. Our art style direction was inspired by Charles Schultz and Bill Watterson for both character designs and our stories, as well as our backgrounds throughout the game. We took game inspirations from Night in the Woods, Friday Night Funkin', and our story ties in with our gameplay styles. The character interactions were really important for us to have. Each is meaningful. You have long conversations with characters to befriend them. We chose these styles because we've been influenced by these works since we were kids, and we wanted to add our modern influences and things like Night in the Woods interactions to some of our first exposures to animated characters. We could relate to our main character Sparky throughout the story because we formed our own group and wanted to create something as a passion of art that we all could share. Overall, the game was really fun to make. We originally started with a fox as our main character, but it did not add anything to our story. You can see in the trailer we hop on trash cans, and there's a few jokes throughout the game towards the character. And we initially had other animals, but it didn't really make our character Sparky stand out, so we switched to humans. We gave him an acoustic guitar just as a reference to Snoopy in the Peanuts Christmas special too. It's fun to see a smaller character with a huge instrument. It just makes it fun. The Schultz style works really well with giving a character personality too, with the larger heads, and we felt that the characters just were brought to life more with this style rather than the lanky style that we originally had. We also felt that our non-playable characters, the characters you pick up along the way, they should feel the same as Sparky, but they play their own instruments, and they're obviously humans, and they're seen like as well as in the rhythm game. And overall, they were really fun to make. As you can see, each of our designs were intentional, whether it's the size of Sparky versus other characters, our fonts, and our line works. We chose a really sketchy line work to kind of resemble the two-dimensional feel to it. Our town, we wanted it to start pretty bright and it feels familiar, but as you travel on, and you can see in our city designs up next, it's vastly different and the colors start to get brighter. It just has a lot more pop to it. You can tell you're in a totally different location along the way. We wanted to put halftones on every asset throughout as well, just to resemble that comic style. You can see halftones within each piece that we made over on hundreds of assets. And we wanted the rhythm level to feel the brightest. It feels like you made it. It's an accomplishment. So our background designs, you can see those have the halftones as well, but we wanted the town assets and the city assets to have a very stark difference, but keep the sketchy style in each, whether it be the lighting or just the coloring itself. The animations were really fun to make. We kept the background ones low frame rate so they weren't distracting from the other characters for legibility reasons. We just wanted it to feel like a 2D piece overall. So our character animations, they each have their own personal take to them. Those two, I apologize, they are broken, but they flow within the game. And it's important to us that we kept each animation kind of original, something you haven't seen on the other character, regardless of the style being the same throughout. Our character Sparky, for example, his animations needed to feel bouncy and influenced by animalistic movements. He's a lot different than our other characters, regardless of their shared interest in music, and we wanted him to for sure represent Snoopy with the quirky expressions and the quirky animations and just overall jumpy feel to him overall. Our rhythm animations, these were our most complicated animations, and we really wanted to emphasize the Peanuts dances that a lot of people know and remember. We wanted to add to the rhythm game something that really made it pop and pulled our music theme together.
So for prototypes, we actually started with Twine because we thought the narrative was really important for our game, going with that underdog to like almost hero story. So with Twine, we started with the basic quest lines, character dialogue, and setting the scene for all of the levels. And then for our first builds, we have some more rudimentary builds where we were focusing on getting gameplay mechanics and coding in, as well as testing the sprites. And finally, we have the rhythm prototypes, where it started with just arrows in random places and buttons, and then we built and mapped out all the arrows into different places. As for sound design, I thought this was worth a mention because we created a song for the game ourselves. And we took a lot of inspiration from Vince Guaraldi, who's the composer for the Peanuts show, except we took that and we made it modern to match our modern characters. So we had modern instruments like a drum set, electric guitar, and such. But we still kept a like swing feel in the piano to reference jazz. And we kept it upbeat and light to match the tone of the story.
So for the games that inspired us, we had 2 games that we talked about heavily when we were concepting our project. And the two being that Damien just talked about, Friday Night Funkin' and Night in the Woods. And Friday Night Funkin' was our main inspiration for the basis of our rhythm level. We wanted to base our rhythm design on Friday Night Funkin's levels because we felt that this layout style was best for a rhythm game, as we found it very readable and easy to follow. We also liked how the arrows were used to track notes and how they correspond with what arrows to hit on the keyboard. Of course, we did put our own spin onto our levels. The arrows in our game flow down from the top of the screen as opposed to coming from the bottom as they do in Friday Night Funkin'. Our level also follows along to the beat of a song that was made in group rather than the vocal cues as they do in Friday Night Funkin'. And for the 3 levels of our game, the main goal is to run and jump around the environment and complete a couple of quests and talk to some non-playable characters or NPCs. And the first quest involves the player going on a hunt to find Mother's hat. And whenever you talk to Mother and other NPCs, a speech bubble will pop up above their head and display their dialogue, just as in Night in the Woods. And we even went as far as using the same Unity tool that Night in the Woods used to create dialogue, and this tool is known as Yarn Spinner. And Yarn Spinner is a narrative tool that helps making in-game dialogue a lot easier to program. And seeing that NPC interactions were an essential part of our game, Yarn Spinner was a no-brainer for us. We wanted to have a tool that could help us write this dialogue into the game so we could have these interesting conversations. And when I was designing and building the first few levels of the game, I was faced with the challenge of figuring out how I even wanted to make the levels. I had a thought at first to do them in a kind of Super Mario fashion with big floating platforms, normal ones, and big jumps. But when I started designing the levels, I'd quickly realized that this style was not going to fit our game and the sprites that we had made at the time. And I had only the background built and nothing else. I decided again to look back at Night in the Woods for some inspiration. I noticed how in Night in the Woods, the environment is what is used for the platforming. So with this in mind, I took the houses that I'd already put into the background and put colliders on them to make it so that the player could get onto them. I had realized that I had created another problem for myself by doing it this way. There was no way to tell the player that they were supposed to jump on these certain areas. So as I was looking in our project for a possible solution, I had remembered that we had animated fireflies that we put in as background objects. And one of these animations is a blinking firefly that sits stationary in space. So I decided to take a few of these and put them on the colliders on the house just to see how they would look. I ended up liking how these fireflies look, so I put them on all of the objects that you can jump onto. And with this change, I also went back in and changed some of the dialogue at the beginning of the game that would let the player know to look for these fireflies. And these fireflies also solved our problem of having to create a specific sprite to make a level trigger that would take the player to the next scene. We can now just make a zone of fireflies hovering about to let the player know that they should go there. And once the player walks to where the cluster of fireflies are, they will be taken to the next level. So with this set of tools, I created the rest of the first and second levels with different environmental obstacles for the players to interact with as they do these quests. And I did this in the third level, except Damien had already laid down some of the background, and I went in and added the platforming and NPCs to it. And finally, we had decided that since we had a smaller group, we would scope our project to only have a limited amount of things that we would need to code. The main things that we for sure needed were the main menu and its functionality, the question and item collection system, our dialogue bubble system, the rhythm game functionality, and our quest arrow, which the quest arrow is what guides the player to the item they need to grab when activated. But thankfully, we were able to push through and get a version of everything we wanted working with fig coding and building the basis of the rhythm level while I did the rest of the systems mentioned before. And thank you.
I think the mic is off.
Okay, there we go. Yay, good job. You put something in the world, and it's super cute. Yeah, I really love how you went for the aesthetic, like the Charles Schultz aesthetic, because you don't see many people work in it. You don't see many people try it out. And I think it is really cool to see like punk peanuts. So like that's really awesome. What would be your next plan for this? Like what if you could like if you were going to keep working on this, what would you keep tweaking?
With time, we wanted to add more rhythm sections. So when you meet new characters, it'd be not like a Pokemon battle, but you get to battle with them and kind of see if their style fits with yours, and you can kind of choose who you want as your on your team. So your end goal with the big venue stadium, it would look different depending on how you play the game. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to add?
That pretty much covered it for me.
Yeah, that covered it for me too.
One of the things I would work on with this this build, like to kind of like shore up your pitch of sorts, right? Like if you were going to go try to get funding, or you were going to go try to keep working on it and recruit some folks, tweak the kind of layering order of some of the art assets. That's a tough thing with working with some of these types of 2D assets, is that and I see it in some of your videos, like the raccoon will walk in front of somebody, but their feet will be in like the NPC's feet will be lower, so figure out who's in front of who. And then like I'm seeing some holes in the sidewalk, like or in the sky, like right there, or actually I think that's the silhouette of a building. Okay, but watch out for those sorts of things. And then there was a little bit of slipperiness with the platforming controller on the character that I could see in the video. So you just kind of want to keep polishing that up. That's what building a platformer is like. So yeah. But yeah, oh, there's Calvin. So yeah, but I mean overall like amazing, and the amount of stuff that you made for 3 people is like really astonishing. Like you don't see 3-person games with like multiple modes in a few months like this. Like that's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As someone who read like a lot of Peanuts and Calvin Hobbes as a kid, I gotta say you just absolutely nailed it on your styling. That's basically all I wanted to say. It's like it reminds me of something, and then it just clicked when I saw this silhouette. Like, oh, he looks like Snoopy, and then yeah, you did a really good job. And I just want to say congrats on that.
Thank you. I'm glad we did multiple passes for it. At first, I think Sparky kind of resembled Hobbes from Calvin and Hobbes, and we were like, the lankiness just it doesn't pop. It's not something that's as recognizable or memorable. So I think that the passes we had really definitely nailed it. Right. Yep. We wanted to kind of mix the two because Schultz doesn't have as many backgrounds and stuff, and so we were really inspired by Calvin and Hobbes. Those are my favorite books growing up. So thank you.
Hi. Yeah, this is really cute. I especially love the level of polish that went into the art, just in all facets. The character animation is really appealing. One point of critique I have, and like this is a problem that you guys recognized and worked around in the process, and that's just the clarity on what parts of the environment are interactable versus what isn't, and kind of like fixing that up with the firefly effect is actually, it's a good way to like figure that out in a short period of time, but really it kind of comes around to like making sure your level design and your background art just kind of is a little more cohesive, because right now, and it also kind of goes into how the characters look in terms of how they fit into the background. A lot of things are grasping for your attention all at once, which, you know, it can make things hard to see, like, you know, you ran into that problem. It's like, well, I don't know what platforms I can jump on, which ones I can't. And that just comes from making sure that even though you planned out a lot of things like the colors become more vibrant as you get to the city, which is a cool way of you know, showing progression through visuals, but you also want to be careful that it doesn't clash too much with your characters, because they can kind of get lost in it as well. And I think the character art and animation is the primary thing of appeal here. So if other things are grasping for your attention as well, you'll lose that. So definitely just making sure those kind of mesh well together can definitely help, but it's still very nice to look at.
Thank you.
Hey y'all, this is gorgeous. You made a gorgeous thing. I feel like if you took this and you put this in a book and you put it on Kickstarter, you'd make money right away. To be quite honest, and if you merchandise these guys into pins and all kinds of stuff, like people would buy it. This is a great product. You got the concept and the idea down. I would say as a video game, it's a really strong start. I wouldn't send it to folks until there were a little bit more polish on it. Like this screen works for what you're doing right now. If I was going to show it to like a funder or something, I'd want all kinds of more things exploding when you're getting stuff. You know, I would oversell it. I always say you can oversell it and then you can pull it back easy, but it's hard to keep ramping it up, right? So oversell it first and then pull it back when it gets to finally be too much. And the same thing with like your idle animations and everything else are on point. Your movement is not, it's floaty. And the animations for when you're falling or you're jumping or things like that are like stand-ins. It gets your point across, but it could be like super polished to come off of it. But yeah, I think you did the hardest part, which was come up with a concept that works, and it's there if you want to take it to somewhere else.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so kudos again for the really specific art style that, again, is not seen very often. I think you guys did a great job of emulating it. One thing that I will say is, and this deals more so with UI design, for some of your dialogue, actually all of your dialogue, you not only have the NPC showing a dialogue bubble showing what they're saying, but you also have at the bottom written out what they're saying. And I kind of want to see if there's a specific reasoning behind why you have it that way.
Yeah, that's because we had to put player choices in, and putting the player choices in involved having to have that box because there had to be something to click on to make it go through. So that was one of the things we talked about, but we ended up having to keeping it just for functionality's sake and to go along with the story.
Yeah, so just moving forward, I would recommend kind of examining whether or not it's necessary, because the screen space that the player has is so important, and you don't want to waste it by duplicating information. So having that dialogue in one area, which I think it works better in the dialogue bubbles than at the bottom of the screen. And I mean, you can do it how Into the Woods, the Night in the Woods. Thank you. Night in the Woods does it, where your dialogue choices are in the bubble, and that you click back and forth between how you do it. Like, that's a really nice artistic, simplistic way that combines space together, so that way it gives more space to the art. So something to consider moving forward, but again, kudos to everything that you've done so far.
I agree, thank you.
All right, good job. All right. What? Last but not least, that that's the rule of a design jury, is you got to say last but not least for the last group, or else. I didn't know that. Yeah, or else the police are going to come. Yeah. The jury.
Hello.
Hi everyone, we are Scallywag Studios, and our game is Captain Chinstrap and the Lost Loot, a point-and-click edutainment adventure game. I am Andrew McDowell, and I was the project lead and lead animator.
I'm Alex Bowling. I was the project's programmer.
I'm Sam Vogel. I was our environment designer and writer.
I'm Cassandra Wynn. I was a 2D lead artist and UI designer.
My name is Connor Leck, and I was the 2D asset artist.
I'm Kayleen Galady. I was also a 2D artist.
And I'm Ted, and I did the music and sound effects.
So our team's research was focused on the importance of learning point-and-click gameplay mechanics in children's edutainment games and the importance of learning soft skills at an early age. We found that point-and-click gameplay mechanics allow children to make mistakes and receive direct communications with the game. And soft skills, which are also known as social and emotional learning skills, can be learned from video games just as they can be learned from children's broadcast TV shows. This helps children get a stronger communication with others and build human relations earlier. We took a lot of inspiration from Humongous Entertainment and did additional research on this company and how they created their catalog of games. In these games, the player typically controls a character with the intention of helping others and solving problems. Instead of taking a mathematical or factual approach to learning, these games focus on the emotional and social side of learning as well. So when starting the game, we were choosing one of the games from Humongous Entertainment, and we chose Putt Putt Saves the Zoo. And we broke down the main components of a Humongous Entertainment game into what makes that a game in the first place. So we created a flowchart that would show all of the items, the item use, and key interactables, NPCs, and scenes. This is a flowchart for the game Putt Putt Saves the Zoo. And once we have this all written down, we can begin to break this down into a smaller format and a comprehensible format for the scope of our team. Here we have an earlier pass and then a final pass of the flowchart for the game. And this was the most important part of the game and the process because this will dictate the animations, the scenes, environmental assets, and art. And when choosing a theme for the game, we thought that choosing pirates would help separate these sections into islands to give the game more variety.
How I went about programming this game is that early on I would make many systems commonly found in point-and-click games, such as non-playable character interactions and an inventory system. Due to the fact that this was still pretty early on in the game's development process, some of the things that the player would and would not be doing had not been fully solidified yet, so I would end up kind of overshooting that and making systems that I wouldn't use later, like combining items and several puzzle systems. The whole point of doing this was so I would have all these systems fully built out and hopefully as bug-free as they can be, so when it came time to make all the screens that you see for the game, it would be as smooth a process as possible, where it's just hopefully me plugging in assets, and that would be all. Barring some unforeseen bugs while doing this, the system of work would allow me to make the game in a timely manner.
And for the animation side of the game, this is a very animation focused with all the visuals. And like how Humongous Entertainment has their later catalog of games, we wanted the game to have unique animations for each scene. So looking back at our original flowchart, we were able to choose and find how many animations were in each scene. And this would be just movement animations, item pickups, and NPC interactions. Here we have a chart of all the animations for each scene. We broke down each scene into a code with a number, which also helps the programmers get the animations in more organized. And then we can break these down into passes. We had 4 passes for all of these animations. And this will also help keep track of all of our animations as well. Here we have a first pass for the blockout, the next pass for fills and in-betweens. This next pass will do shading and hat fills. And this last pass here will be the polishing for facial animations and anything else we may need. And for item integrations into the environment, we decided to have Chinstrap, the penguin, throw a rope. This is an example of an item integration in the game. Once he throws the rope, the asset from the rope will be integrated into the environment and fade smoothly into the background. And for NPCs in the game, we had some help with Grayson and the project. They're not here right now, unfortunately, but they did a lot of work with concept art for these NPCs, and they can talk to, same process with animating multiple passes, and this gives more variety in the world and allow people to talk to these fun animals and help them out with their problems.
Yeah, and I will say for NPCs, Grayson really emphasized their color palettes and how our NPCs and villain have different color palettes. And for our environments, they were all created to feel very expressive and spacious, and they allow Chinstrap to show lots of dynamic movement as he switches between the scenes. And these all started as simple sketches and blockouts, so our animators could use them and quickly start animating. But then we moved to more solid line work and then to base coloring.
Yeah, so Sam and Kayleen did the base blockouts and base coloring, and I went in to do the final renders. This was to ensure style consistency across our scenes and our inventory assets as well. We also added a glow effect to our interactable items, so when the player hovers over them, they will glow and trigger a response. So this is in line with our point and click mechanic, in where the player will point with their cursor and then click, which is that confirmation to interact, and that will trigger a object pickup, use, or a change in environment.
All right, so these are the 2D asset artists for the inventory / pickup items. I worked with Kayleen on these. We split the work 50-50. We gave them bright colors so that they would stand out in our environments, and like Cassandra said, they would glow when the player hovers their cursor over them, and that is how they would be presented in the game.
And then for our narrative, it balances lots of childlike wonder and pirate facts, along with our game central theme to teach children about sharing and other soft skills, such as dealing with communication and problem-solving issues. And these all include fun pirate speak. And you saw we had some dialogue Excel sheets, and then our opening cutscene, as you partially saw in our trailer, starts as an intro to our narrative, and it sets the scene with childlike drawings.
So our ending cutscene returns to the childlike crayon theme style of the opening cutscene, and also wraps up Chinstrap's story, while enforcing our goal of teaching children the importance of social and emotional learning skills, primarily sharing and understanding. And that was a preview of our ending cutscene.
On the sound design, the structure with the letter and the number code for the scene and transitions made it much easier to find
what sound goes to what animation, because I had to send them to Drew, who would put them in the final game. So being able to communicate it easily through like a pre-existing system made it much smoother than having to discuss what sound is what. And the other thing that we struggled with was finding music and sounds that were like copyright and royalty free. And for the ones that we couldn't find, I just had to end up making myself through Audacity. Obviously, we can't play the sound during the PowerPoint, but for all the items uses have sounds, and then the NPCs, who are all animals, make sounds that are either taken from like the animal itself that they are, or that make a sound that similar to the animal would make.
And we will now open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Hello, it's me again. I just want to say kudos to all of you on the super awesome movement style of Chinstrap, the way he bops and jives and slides. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this did it all. Like, and I don't mean just like from a game perspective. I mean like the completeness and the thoroughness of how you. And really, I mean, like not just your group, like all three groups in Capstone. Like I really commend all of you for like. I've had semesters before where I'm like, okay, at some point I'm gonna have to talk to this team about scope. I had to talk to no team about scope this semester. That's a first, okay? And the completeness, but back to you, the completeness with which you walked through all of it is so lovingly documented. I really like that you talked about like we analyzed, we applied that analysis technique into a generative technique to plan our own game, you know, and its structure. And then you walk through, I mean, it really was a really good encapsulation of like all the techniques you have had through the entire curriculum. Like you have passes on animation, you have, you know, the storyboards, you have everything put together, and you're doing the whole unit, right? And not just in the technical aspect, but in the production and the teamwork and the organizational aspect. And I really think it, you know, fantastic job. I think it bears out in the final project.
Thank you. I just have to say, whoever did Chinstrap's animations really knew what those old edutainment games were all about, because they reminded me so much of the old like Leap Star, those like, you know, first like education, like the way they zoom in and out and they're so like goofy and cartoony. I thought that was super well done. I also noticed that like the backgrounds and like all of the UI elements, they were all very like bright and colorful and almost vector-esque. Like I noticed some of the backgrounds reminded me of like old Flash games almost, which was really nice because I know those old edutainment games were kind of made in, some of them were like made like with like Flash-like elements. So I thought that was like really incredible. This whole project came together super well, and you could really see how much work that you guys put in. I think you should be super proud of what you've done.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say I like the irony of an emotionally intelligent pirate. But no, jokes aside, I thought you guys did an amazing job. I think the presentation is amazing. The art style is spot on. The animations are awesome. I think you guys did great.
Thanks. I think you all set out to replicate a style, and you did it. Like it's very, it absolutely could have been from that era. It moves very smoothly. If I saw that, I'd be like, cool, it's a game, you know? Which sounds like, maybe that doesn't sound like a compliment, but I think you all know that that is a compliment, right? Because we all see it in the ugly phase when it does not look like a game at all. I think the one warning I'd give you is that, you know, in the educational games community, we look back on the edutainment normal people look back on it fondly. The people in the educational games community look back on it as a dark time because those games often promised education that was never tested and never actually there. And so I would say if you decide to move forward with this, and I think you absolutely could, if you decide to move forward with it, if you're going to make any educational claims, whether that's about socio-emotional learning or about anything else, get it backed up. And that's a thing that you can do. You can call a university. I don't know, there's some universities around here, and find an educational researcher student or something and be like, hey, we have a game. We want to know, does it improve emotional resilience in kids who play it? And I'd be like, hey, that's a great capstone project for me. Let me borrow your game, and develop some of those. If you're actually going to go down that path and use that kind of language in your trailers and stuff like that, go down that path and you might find some really interesting stuff. And if you do that, I would strongly recommend that you submit it for student award nomination at the Games for Change Festival, which focuses on games for impact. And if you had research and a cool prototype, that would make it a really compelling entry.
Thank you.
And I would like to also mention that Meaningful Play is this fall at Carnegie Mellon, which you should also submit it to.
So why is Captain's Chin Trap orange? Why that color? I like green more.
So we ran through different color tests when it came to his design, and so because we had originally planned with our environments to be vibrant and fun, we decided to have a contrasting color that would stand out against our environments. And so for the cave, it would be mostly purples and blues, and so we decided to go with a warm tone. And then for the jungle, we made sure to have outlines for him as well, just so he doesn't get lost, in addition to having his hat be black. And so having those contrasting colors really helped out with our environments.
You've sold me on orange, thank you.
Yeah, so great job. So in talking about it being an educational game, what was the age demographic you were targeting, and what were there any specific things you did in designing the puzzles or maybe character interactions that you did specifically because of that age demographic?
Well, the intention originally starting the project was to keep it in like a ages 3 to 10 rating, like in that general area. But it can also be enjoyed by pretty much anyone in like any age above that. And the childlike aspect of it, the ending cutscene, we have pretty much Chinstrap is a child because his toys get stolen, and you're getting those back. So pretty much, if you're a child and you get your toys stolen, you can learn how to share and understand sharing. That's the main message of the game.
And if I may, one reason we picked like sharing and like the soft skills is because as someone who was a kid and played these games as a kid, if a game had here do some math problems, I would be instantly kind of put off. You have to make the kids and what kids do think that not realize they're doing something educational, or they will inherently kind of be not opposed, but if you can make it feel like a game with the lesson in it rather than a vehicle just to do some math or answer some multiple choice questions, I think that you can get much more engagement and more like retain the information itself.
And that's a wrap to the 2024 Spring Showcase. We have some cookies and punch outside if anybody wants to hang out. And some of the games from the Capstone project are in the lobby if anybody wants to try them out. Thanks for coming, everybody.